Welcome into this weekly edition of Beyond the Arc here on High School Cube News. Brian Chimino with you with Michael O'Brien of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our number one story of last week, number 1 Stevenson on the road at number 4 Lake Forest. Capacity crowd packed into that little gym up in Lake Forest, and this game absolutely delivered. It looked like Stevenson was going to pull away a couple of times, but every time Lake Forest came back, even taking the lead with a couple minutes of left. But Jalen Brunson said enough of that. 41 points as he had Stevenson pull away with the win. Final score 76-69.
Just a super fun game. What a week in the area. All the way up from Lake Forest, sold out gym, great crowd. All the way down, to Simeon Morgan Park, sold out, great crowd. All the way out to St. Charles. It was just a fabulous week. And this was one of the best games of the year, no doubt. Lake Forest really did everything they could. They were really impressive. They could have kind of given up, but instead in the third quarter, while Jalen Brunson was dominating, Lake Forest was coming back and managed to get back in that game. It was impressive. Lake Forest has upside. Lorenzo Edwards has gotten better each time I've seen him. I think he's going to keep getting better. You pointed out to me during the game, Lake Forest was defending the rim a little bit against Stevenson. And you're right, there's a lot of upside with Lake Forest. This isn't over. They might see one another again, and it's not impossible to think Lake Forest could pull it out.
Again and again, possible sectional final matchup as well. So Stevenson stays at number 1, Mike, but a couple other publications moved them out of number 1. They did lose on Saturday to Findlay Prep by a big amount, but some papers moving St. Rita into number 1, but you kept Stevenson there.
Yeah, this is obviously losing to Findlay Prep. For those of you that don't know, it's in Las Vegas. It's a national prep school. They take kids from all over the country. Their whole team is Division I kids. They win the national championship, the mythical national championship most years. They're really good. Losing to them is no big, shame, really, for Stevenson. It would have been nicer if they could have played them a little closer. It was a bad blowout. But that means when they lose is if you think someone's better than Stevenson, that's your chance to move them up. And I give serious consideration to St. Rita. St. Rita has a tremendous resume. They've beat some great teams. You could say that their win over Simeon is the biggest win anyone has in the area. And then they have beaten the team that Chaminade out of St. Louis that beat Stevenson. So St. Rita's legitimate. I don't have any problem really with anybody moving them to number 1. I stuck with Stevenson for now, kind of just based on their run through the playoffs the last few years. I have a little bit more faith in them than St. Rita right now.
The Simeon Wolverines had a big week last week. Tuesday knocking off Morgan Park for the second time this year, then Thursday being vocational. Then they lost on Saturday to Archbishop Carroll, I believe out of Philadelphia on Saturday. So a busy week for Simeon, going 2-1.
Yeah, the Simeon Morgan Park game, wow. Just amazing players all over. Everyone played at such a high level. It was a super fun game. Morgan Park unable to get over the Simeon hump this year. They may meet again, in the city playoffs. We'll see about that. Simeon is solid. They really seem to have come into their own. There's not so much up and down as before. And what do you say about the loss to Archbishop Carroll on the road? We knew going into this year that our teams weren't quite as great as they had been the last few years, and that's being proven out. Morgan Park's got 3 or 4 losses out of state. Everybody's going out of state playing these top teams and not winning.
We talk about the Simeon Wolverines, and we talk about Morrow, Williams, and Moss, but we're not talking about Zach Norville enough.
Yeah, he has really come on. Since Pontiac, he's been a new player. Since Armand Benford became the point guard for Simeon, and he hasn't had to worry about that. A lot of times having to do too much is not a good thing. And Zach Norvell can concentrate on knocking down those threes, being a real threat with the basketball, and he's really become a star instead of just a complimentary player.
Another big rivalry game from last week, St. Charles East taking their 13-game win streak on the line to St. Charles North, and this was also a great ball game. And then the fourth quarter, it looked like St. Charles East was going to advance it to 14 games, but then St. Charles North star Jake Ludwig was not having any of that. He got the game to overtime and eventually hit the game winner as St. Charles North upset St. Charles East.
I can't get enough Upstate River basketball. Such a long drive, but always so worth it. It's just a great race. Both the St. Charles teams, fun to watch, great high school basketball teams. Geneva right there now. Larkin nothing to sneeze at. So it's a lot of fun, but don't discount St. Charles North. They did lose worse than I would have thought to Geneva on Friday night. Then come back at this huge win against St. Charles East. Jake Ludwig, out of nowhere, really putting together an all-area campaign. I think he'd be on my ballot right now. Not sure he'd be on everybody else's. So they're a team to watch. The problem with the whole Upstate 8 River area, though, Rockford Auburn looms. You know, they're not in our area, Rockford Auburn, so we don't talk about them. But it's really hard to see any of these fun, great high school basketball teams really advancing much past the sectional because Rockford Auburn is really good. We should point out that they just smashed Neuqua Valley this week, a game we were looking ahead to a little bit. Rockford Auburn is for real, and they could wind up in Peoria, and it's going to kind of ruin it for our upstate 8 River teams.
And finally this week, West Aurora getting revenge against Bartlett. They lost to Bartlett back in December. That was without Roland Griffin, but this week's MVP with Beth Long here on High School Cube News, Roland Griffin of West Aurora. Big stat line on Friday.
Yeah, and the key for him wasn't even all the points or wasn't even all the rebounds. Bartlett, their high-scoring senior guard, Ryan DeCanio, is the one I went out there to see. He's a good player, can really shoot the ball, but in the second half, Roland Griffin, and all really long, strong, 6'5", 6'6" of him, was guarding Ryan DeCanio, and that's tough. Getting around him, even getting your shot off around him. Roland Griffin really won that game, I think, for West Aurora on defense. West Aurora can shoot it. They lost some games early, didn't have the best Pontiac ever, losing to Curie, but they're on a roll now. They've got a bunch of guys that can hit the three, and they're dangerous. In the fourth quarter of that game, they made 11 baskets in a row, shot 11 to 12 in the quarter, scored like 31, 32 points. West Aurora's on the rise. They're back in the rankings. Look out.
Just a reminder, the No Shot Clock podcast with Mike and Joe Henriksen drops on your podcast apps every Tuesday. For Michael O'Brien, I'm Brian Chimino. We see you later in the week with a whole new edition of 5 Things to Watch here on High School Cube News.